Subhuti, thank you for a lovely talk today on transforming self and world, about your work in India and with the Gypsies in Hungary.
Yes.
And what struck me about it was this double-edged coin of transforming self and world. And how they both go together. You talked about how meeting humanity
meeting as human beings,
is the key in dealing with, in working with those communities. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, on the self side, whatever situation you're in, you go as yourself, and if you're not sufficiently clear about who you are and what you are, you respond from clinging to your social identity. Well, I talked about my own class background and national background, white, male, English, middle class, and so on. So obviously I see the world through that lens, and I carry that with me. And to some extent, to a large extent, one's identified with those sort of factors. But if you're going to reach somebody from a completely different background, and you're going to benefit them in some way, you need to be aware of your own conditioning and not be overly identified with it. And then you're in a position to meet them human being to human being, and then something can happen. So it can't be just me as a privileged white middle class male going to help some poor benighted person of colour who's deprived and so forth. And well, then some pride is going to be involved in that, and some patronage is going to be involved in that. And the other person, rightly, if they'll either play to that, or they will be rightly indignant. So one needs to look at oneself very closely and understand oneself in that situation, which is not easy.
It's not easy because conditioning and culture is very deep, very strong.
It is indeed, yes, it is.
Do you have any examples of where you've moved beyond that, I guess, or where you suddenly had a realisation that gone, oh yes?
Yeah. Well, I talked a little bit about it from the point of view of I used to feel very lonely in India, and a bit in Hungary when I first went there, because they didn't communicate in the way that I communicated. So that, for instance, in the circles I come from, we're accustomed to talking about our own psychology and our own experience quite a bit. People don't do that. You're from a community where the issues are food and real oppression. You're not so bothered about your own psychological states. So what's there to talk about? They have to sort of recognise, well, this is just to do with my particular background, and it's not the way to have deep communication. It might be part of it, but it's not the whole thing. I don't know whether that communicates what I mean.
It sounds like quite a deep level of listening, of really noticing.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes, yeah. Listening this way and that way. Yeah, listening inwards and listening outwards. And the contrast helps you to see yourself. That's the way we understand what we're like, is in contrast. Otherwise you don't discover. It's a mirror held up. Well, the mirror doesn't work, does it, as an analogy? But it acts as a mirror ultimately, because you're forced, if you really want to communicate, to look.
And do you think you've learnt, well, I get the impression you say you have learnt a great deal. It's been very two-way.
I think I'm the gainer. I hope I've done something beneficial. I'm sure I have. But I feel I'm the gainer. I'm the one it's been a key part of my spiritual practice, crossing those boundaries. And I'm extremely grateful to my friends in India and in Hungary.
What are some of the things that make you feel aware of when you're talking with people, when you're communicating with people that come from a very different background, a very different culture? What are some of the things that have made you feel aware of who you are and where you're coming from? Maybe some examples.
Nothing very instantly springs to mind, but I suppose that it's mainly in this area of communicating and realising that what they are wanting from the communication is not what I want from the communication, and then having to step back from that and just think, communication, some level below the level of the words and my expectations and so forth, and just tuning in. And then realising, for instance, as a white male middle-class Englishman of a reasonably good education, I naturally think I understand everything. I naturally think that I can sort everything out. Particularly, I come from a family of engineers, so I think that I can fix it all. And so I have to drop that and just recognise I've no idea what to do here. It's particularly in Hungary I feel this, because my role is not so clear. So I have to just drop any idea about fixing anything. I do it occasionally, I have to try to drop it and just open up and listen and be interested. And unfortunately, part of my character is to be interested, which is a part I'm glad about. I want to hear what people have got to say.
That kind of presence, what feels to me like you're describing, just sort of showing up, being there, but being there with an openness.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, that particularly I find that in Hungary. In India, I've got more of a role because I'm going within the context of the order. So I went as a preceptor, and then I went as the leader of the men's ordination team, and contributing also to the women's ordination team because it's much less developed at that stage. So I went with a definite role and a job to do, and Indians very much accepted me in that role. In Hungary, I didn't have any role. Mm-hmm. It was very challenging for me, very challenging.
But on the other side of the coin, very useful, probably quite a good opportunity for growth and awareness.
Indeed,
sort of peeling back the layers of self,
absolutely,
in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finding that across those barriers, I've got really, really deep friendship. Across all that. When I was in Hungary when Bhante died, and I decided I was going to go back, and that meant I had to get to the airport in Budapest, 3-hour drive by a certain time. I could do it by public transport, so I said, look, I'm going, can you just get me to the train station? I'll go. János is my closest friend there, amongst the gypsies, just said, no, I'm going to take you. I said, look, no, it's just 3-hour drive, and you've got to come back another 3 hours. He said, no question, no discussion. He just took me to the airport. I feel really moved by what he did. He just took me to the airport. He just said, this is too important, and I've got to take you. So I reached that point where there's that definite sense of human feeling, and I think I would do the same for him. Mm.
And you were talking about the importance in the Sangha of together transforming, I guess.
Yeah.
But trying to impact positively on the world together, and how important that is.
Yes. Yeah. I think that is extremely important, because when Sangha is not something you experience abstractly, it's something you experience, as it were, between yourself and other people. You participate in Sangha. It's not an idea, and it's one of the biggest things we have to contribute. A very vivid experience of this just last week when I was in Hungary. We did run a class, a conventional day of meditation and study, and there were 3 of us, myself, Aryasaki and Triratna. And I was so aware that most of what we were doing was being the 3 of us together. That's most of what had an impact, if you see what I mean. We communicated something by the way in which we were together, which was very good, very easy, very straightforward, with a very deep sense of shared ideals which not even thought about. It's just there. So when you act on that basis, you have a far bigger impact than if you do just on your own. You can carry it in yourself, but it's very difficult.
It's much harder, isn't it? Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing we have to offer the world is Sangha, on one level or another, which is human solidarity in ideals, but that human solidarity begins not at the level of the big ideals, just in humanity. It's being a human being with other human beings. And that's something that people don't always get much of a chance for. So if we can together go into things, and what we might be doing is beneficial in itself, but most of what we're doing is being together with them and including them in a level of Sangha that we experience.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
We really enjoyed it today, your
Good.
talk, and I
Good.
hope to have you back.
Oh, I'm waiting. I felt I'd said about 1% of what I've got to say. Yeah, it's a subject that's very dear to my heart, and I want to reiterate that I'm extremely pleased that you and your friends are running this class, and I'd like to see it having a much higher profile in the LBC's program, because we're not here just to sort ourselves out.
Certainly. Thank you very much.
Okay, jolly good. What's your badge?